The night felt colder than usual. Noah was alone in the old family house, the one that had always made him uneasy. The wind howled outside, and the house groaned under the weight of its own age. He sat in the dimly lit living room, staring at the dusty fireplace. There was no fire tonight. The flames had long since died. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream pierced the silence. It came from somewhere deep within the house, echoing off the walls. Noah's heart skipped a beat. He stood up, his breath shallow, feeling the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. It couldn't be real. He had to be imagining, but the scream was too clear, too vivid to ignore. It was the kind of scream that shook the very soul, like a cry for help from another world. His mind raced as the house seemed to close in on him. He had to know what was happening. His hand trembled as he reached for the door, but a voice in the back of his mind told him to turn back. He ignored it. This was his family's legacy, and it was time he uncovered the truth. Noah paced around the house, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The scream still echoed in his mind, haunting him. He tried to focus, to convince himself it was just his imagination. The house had always made him uneasy, but this was different. The walls felt alive, as if they were watching him, waiting for him to do something. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft whisper, faint yet unmistakable. It came from the direction of the staircase. Noah froze, his body tensing. The whispering continued, growing louder, like it was calling him, pulling him closer. It was almost as if the house was alive, breathing with him. He moved slowly toward the stairs, every step filled with dread. What was he getting into? He wasn't sure. But he had to know. Something in him demanded the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be. Noah's footsteps echoed in the silence as he climbed the stairs, each step creaking beneath him. The whisper grew louder, clearer, as if it was guiding him. His heart raced. He wasn't sure what he was expecting, but he knew that turning back wasn't an option. He reached the top of the stairs and paused. The hallway before him was shrouded in darkness, but something he couldn't explain, was pulling him forward. A shadow flickered in the corner of his vision, vanishing as quickly as it appeared. He wasn't alone. The feeling of being watched intensified, and the air grew colder. He could hear faint, distant footsteps, but when he turned around, there was no one there. Something was in the house with him, something he couldn't see but could feel, growing closer with each passing second. Noah hesitated before stepping forward, but the sound of something moving in the dark urged him onward. His steps were cautious, his eyes scanning the shadows. The house felt larger than it had ever been, as if the walls were slowly closing in on him. Every corner, every shadow seemed alive, as if they were holding their breath, waiting. He passed a door slightly ajar and glanced inside. His heart skipped. There, standing in the middle of the room, was an old mirror, cracked down the center. The reflection stared back at him, not his own face, but someone else. Someone with dark, hollow eyes. Before he could react, the image vanished, leaving only his reflection once again. He stumbled backward, his breath quickening. This was no longer just a house. This was a nightmare. Noah's pulse raced as he backed away from the mirror, his heart pounding in his chest. He tried to rationalize what he had just seen, but deep down, he knew it wasn't a trick of the light. Something dark, something ancient, was stirring within the walls of this house. He turned and fled down the hallway, his mind swirling with thoughts of what he had just witnessed. He had to escape. He had to leave before it was too late. But when he reached the door, he found it slammed shut, locking him inside. Panic surged. The house wasn't letting him go. It was pulling him deeper into its embrace. And the darkness was only just beginning. Noah couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The house, once familiar, now seemed foreign, even hostile. The whispers had grown louder, swirling around him in a constant hum, like they were trying to push him towards something. As he walked down the hallway, the temperature dropped. His breath came out in visible puffs, and the walls felt cold to the touch. He stopped in front of an old door, one he had never seen before. It was hidden behind a large tapestry, its wood cracked and worn. He hesitated, but the whispers grew frantic, almost pleading. With a trembling hand, he reached for the door. It opened with a loud creak, revealing a room filled with dusty furniture and old forgotten books. A single light flickered above him, casting strange shadows across the walls. The atmosphere was thick with a sense of dread. Noah couldn't explain why, but he knew this room was important. He had to go inside. Noah stepped into the room, and the door slammed shut behind him. The air inside was thick, as if it hadn't been disturbed in years. Dust covered everything, and old furniture sat in disarray. At the center of the room was a large, cracked mirror. Noah felt drawn to it. He hesitated, but the urge to approach it was overwhelming. As he stood before the mirror, his reflection seemed wrong. His own face stared back at him, but the eyes were hollow, black as coal. He blinked, and the reflection shifted. The eyes were now filled with terror. Pleading for help, Noah stepped back, heart pounding. His own reflection was trapped inside, a prisoner of something he couldn't understand. The room felt alive, breathing around him, and Noah realized with growing horror that the room was holding him, just as it had trapped the reflection. Noah backed away from the mirror, his heart racing. The reflection seemed to twist and shift as if it had a life of its own. He turned to leave, but the door was gone. In its place was a solid wall, cold and unyielding. Panic surged through him as the room seemed to close in on him. The whispers grew louder, now joined by a low, guttural growl that made his skin crawl. He pounded on the wall, desperate for an escape, but it wouldn't budge. His thoughts were racing. Was this a hallucination, or had the house truly become something else? The temperature dropped even further, and he could see his breath in the air. The walls were beginning to close in, inch by inch, and Noah realized with terror that the room itself was alive, feeding off his fear. He had to find a way out before it consumed him completely. In his desperation, Noah turned back to the mirror. It was his only hope. Maybe, just maybe, it could offer an escape. He reached for it, his fingers trembling. As his hand touched the glass, the reflection began to shift again. But this time, it wasn't just his face that appeared. A figure, dark and formless, emerged from the depths of the mirror. It reached for him with elongated fingers, its face a blur of shadow. Noah stumbled back, but his feet were glued to the floor. The figure was coming out of the mirror, its form twisting and contorting as if made of smoke. It was all around him now, and Noah could feel its icy presence. The whispers were now a chorus, demanding his attention, pulling him closer to the figure. There was no escape. Noah's body trembled as the figure's hand reached for his chest. And in that moment, he knew it wasn't just a reflection. It was something far worse. With a sudden burst of strength, Noah broke free from the mirror's grip. He stumbled backward, gasping for air. The figure remained in the mirror, its face now clear, a twisted, distorted version of his own. Noah's legs felt like they were giving out beneath him, but he couldn't stop. He had to get out. As he turned toward the door, it opened on its own. A dark, narrow hallway stretched before him, its end lost in shadow. He ran toward it, ignoring the whispers that continued to swirl around him. Every step felt like it was pulling him deeper into the nightmare. The darkness was closing in, and Noah knew he couldn't outrun it forever. He had to face whatever was chasing him, or it would consume him whole. Noah's heart raced as his footsteps echoed through the narrow hallway. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was closing in on him, waiting for him to slip up. The walls seemed to pulse with a sinister energy, and every creak of the house made his blood run cold. He turned a corner and found himself in a room he didn't recognize. The air was thick with dust and the scent of mildew. A single light bulb flickered overhead, casting long, jagged shadows across the room. The floorboards groaned under his weight as he stepped forward. Suddenly, he froze. A figure was standing in the far corner of the room, its back turned to him. It was tall and shadowy, its form shifting and contorting in the dim light. Noah's breath caught in his throat, and for a moment, he stood frozen in place. Then the figure turned, revealing a face that was both familiar and terrifyingly foreign. The figure took a step toward him, its movement unnatural, like a marionette controlled by invisible strings. Noah backed away, but his legs felt heavy, as though the very air was thickening around him. The room seemed to shrink with every passing second. The whispers that had followed him since the beginning grew louder, now becoming clear voices, as if 1,000 people were speaking at once. The figure's face twisted in agony, its eyes black pools of emptiness. As it moved closer, its form began to shift, morphing into something else. Noah's stomach churned. This wasn't a person, it was something else, something that didn't belong. The figure's mouth opened, and Noah heard a voice that was not its own. "You cannot escape," it hissed, the words wrapping around him like a tightening noose. Noah's mind raced. Was this a dream? A nightmare? He could barely process what was happening, but instinct kicked in. He turned and bolted for the door, but it slammed shut just as his hand touched the handle. Panic surged through him. He pounded on the door, his fists bloodying as he struck it again and again. The figure was still behind him, its movement slow but deliberate. Noah could hear it breathing, his breath ragged and sharp like it was savoring his fear. Desperation clawed at him. There was no way out. His pulse hammered in his ears, and for the first time in his life he felt utterly powerless. The house, the thing haunting it, had trapped him. He was its prey, and it was toying with him. A chill filled the room as the figure stepped closer, its form beginning to solidify into something more human-like. Its features were still obscured by shadows, but its presence was undeniable. The whispers that had tormented Noah now became voices from his past, echoes of memories long buried. "You can't hide from yourself," the figure whispered, its voice familiar but distorted. Noah's knees buckled as the weight of its words hit him. The memories flooded back. Guilt, regret, betrayal. Things he had locked away deep in his mind were now brought to the surface. His greatest fears were now embodied in this dark entity. He had to face them, or it would be the end. But how could he fight something that was so deeply entwined with his soul? Noah slowly lifted his head, meeting the figure's gaze. For a moment, everything was still. His heart pounding in his chest, his breath shallow. The figure's eyes seemed to pierce through him, seeing into his very soul. "You've been running for so long," it said, its voice like a low growl. "You can't escape yourself." With each word, Noah felt the weight of his own past crash down on him. The house wasn't just a prison, it was a reflection of everything he had been trying to escape. The darkness, the fear, it all came from within him. He had to face it, but just as he was about to speak, the figure lunged forward, its hands reaching for his throat. Noah screamed, but no sound came out. It was too late. The darkness consumed. Noah's heart thudded in his chest as the figure from the mirror faded into the shadows. He was gasping for air, his mind swirling with thoughts of what he had just seen. The figure had been him, but twisted, broken. The house seemed to pulse with life around him, each room a memory he couldn't outrun. He moved shakily toward the staircase, but the weight of the air pressing down on him was unbearable. The whispers now spoke clearly, their words sinking into his mind. "You cannot escape yourself." The words echoed again, and Noah staggered back. He realized now. The house was not just a building. It was a prison, a reflection of everything he had tried to bury. His family's dark past had bled into every corner of the house, and now the truth was undeniable. His family's curse wasn't just a story. It was real, and it had followed him home. Noah's mind reeled as the words of the whispers filled his head. The house wasn't just a building. It was a vessel, holding the weight of his family's darkest secrets. His hands shook as he gripped the railing, his fingers cold against the metal. Memories began to flood back, fragmented and disjointed. He remembered his father's cold eyes, the way his mother had always looked over her shoulder, as if afraid of something in the house. They had knew something Noah had been too young to understand. The figure he saw, the reflection that wasn't his own, was a reminder of all he had tried to forget. His family's curse had been passed down, and now it was coming for him. He had to find the source of this evil, or it would consume him, just as it had consumed them. Determined, Noah pushed forward, his every step a fight against the growing dread that threatened to consume him. The whispers grew louder, surrounding him with their unintelligible murmuring. As he moved through the house, he felt like he was being drawn to a certain place, a room he had never dared to enter before. The door was old, covered in layers of dust, its wood groaning in protest as Noah turned the handle. He hesitated, the air around him thick with a sense of finality. But he had no choice. He had to face what lay behind the door. As it creaked open, a wave of cold hit him, and for the first time, Noah felt the full weight of his family's curse. Inside, the room was filled with old, faded photographs. Images of ancestors he didn't recognize. They were all staring at him, their eyes dark and hollow, as if they had been waiting for him to arrive. Noah stepped inside the room, his eyes immediately drawn to the wall, lined with old photographs. They were all black and white, each one featuring a member of his family, ancestors, relatives he had never met. But what caught his attention were their eyes. They were all staring at him, as if they knew he was the one who would break the cycle. In the center of the room, on a pedestal, stood a dusty, ancient book. Its cover was adorned with symbols he didn't recognize. Noah could feel its presence, the weight of its secrets. The book seemed to pulse with a dark energy as though it was alive, calling to him. He reached out, his hand trembling as he touched the cover. The moment his fingers made contact, a cold wind swept through the room, and the whispers grew into a roar, filling his mind with visions of the past, of his ancestors trapped in this cursed house, their souls bound to it forever. As Noah opened the book, the room around him seemed to warp and shift. The photographs on the walls seemed to come alive, their eyes following his every movement. He turned the pages slowly, his heart racing as he uncovered the horrifying truth about his family. The curse that had haunted them for generations was no accident. It had been deliberately created, a dark pact made long ago. His ancestors had sold their souls to a malevolent force, binding themselves to the house in exchange for power and wealth. The price had been steep. Each generation had to sacrifice one of its own to keep the curse alive. Noah's blood ran cold as he realized that he was the final piece, the last sacrifice. The house wasn't just a prison, it was a trap, and he was its prey. Noah's heart pounded in his chest as he stood before the book, the weight of the curse pressing down on him. The room was suffocating, the shadows alive, moving as though they were waiting for him to make his final move. The whispers were louder now, growing into a deafening roar in his ears. He knew the truth. He was the last piece of the puzzle, the the final sacrifice to complete the dark ritual. His ancestors had bound their souls to this house, and now it was his turn to fulfill the pact. He could feel the presence closing in on him, the air thick with the malevolent energy of the house. The house, the curse, it was all alive, a living, breathing entity that had waited for him to return. With no other choice, Noah stepped forward, the decision made. He had to end it, break the cycle, or risk becoming a part of the house forever. As Noah placed his hand on the book, the room seemed to shake. The whispers intensified, now screaming in his mind, but he pushed through. The pages of the book flipped rapidly, as if moved by an unseen force. His vision blurred, and he saw flashes of his family, his ancestors, trapped within the walls of the house. Their faces were twisted in agony, their eyes pleading for freedom. They had made the deal, and now it was Noah's turn to pay. But the house was not ready to let go. The floor beneath his feet trembled, and the walls seemed to close in on him. Noah could feel the house's grip tightening, the curse refusing to release him. The energy from the book surged through him, and for a moment, he saw the entity that had plagued his family for generations. It was massive, dark, and ancient, its eyes glowing with malice. It was the source of the curse, the one who had enslaved his bloodline. Noah's legs buckled as the dark force surged through him. The weight of his family's sins pressed down on his chest, suffocating him. He fell to his knees, gasping for breath. The shadows around him writhed, taking form, becoming more tangible. The entity, the dark force, was no longer just a presence. It was a physical manifestation, its twisted body reaching out from the shadows, its eyes burning with unrelenting rage. Noah could feel it, could feel its hunger. It wanted him. It had always wanted him. The house creaked and groaned as if it were alive, its foundations shaking with the power of the entity. The walls were closing in, and Noah knew that unless he fought back, he would be consumed by it, just as his ancestors had been before him. Desperation fueled Noah's every movement as he pushed against the dark force trying to claim him. He had to fight back, had to break the curse. With every ounce of strength, he forced himself to stand. The whispers intensified, trying to break his resolve, but he gritted his teeth and closed his eyes. His thoughts turned to his family, their suffering, their pain. He could not let it continue. He had to end this. Gathering every ounce of courage, Noah opened his eyes and, with a primal scream, tore the book from its pedestal. The room shook violently as the dark energy tried to pull it back. But Noah held on. The house screamed in protest, but Noah's grip remained firm. He knew this was the moment. He had to release his family, break the chain, or risk becoming part of it forever. The book finally shattered in his hands, and the darkness that had surrounded him exploded outward, howling in fury. The room erupted in a flash of blinding light, and for a moment, everything went still. Noah's body trembled, his vision blurred, but he knew something had changed. The house had gone quiet. The weight that had been pressing on his chest was gone. He looked around, the shadows dissipating, the oppressive atmosphere lifting. The curse had been broken, but as the light faded, Noah saw something that made his blood run cold. His family's faces, trapped in the walls, staring back at him, their eyes full of grief and regret. The house had been freed, but the spirits of his ancestors remained, bound to the place that had cursed them. And Noah knew that the house would never truly let go of him. Noah stumbled backward, his breath shallow as the room seemed to distort around him. The light flickered and the shadows crept closer, no longer retreating but pushing forward. The force, the presence that had haunted his family for generations, was not gone. It had only been temporarily subdued. The house groaned and creaked, as though it were alive, mourning the loss of its grip on Noah. He could feel the dark energy pooling in the air, thick and suffocating. He had come so close to breaking the curse, But the house was not ready to let him go. The air felt colder now, the silence oppressive, broken only by the sound of his own panicked breathing. He knew what he had to do. To truly break free, Noah had to face the entity head-on. It had lived inside this house, inside his bloodline, for far too long. But now, Noah was ready to confront it, to destroy it once and for all. Noah clenched his fists, his mind racing as he stared into the heart of the darkness. The shadows that had once seemed like mere tricks of the light now writhed and twisted, forming into something more solid. The entity was here, finally showing itself. Its form was massive, shifting like smoke, but with a presence that was unmistakably real. Its eyes, glowing a deep red, locked onto Noah, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. Noah could feel the weight of its gaze, 1,000 years of malice and rage pouring into him. "You cannot escape," the entity whispered, its voice low and guttural, reverberating through the room. The words were not just a threat. They were a truth Noah had to face. He had no escape. Only confrontation. Noah's heart hammered in his chest as the entity advanced, its form becoming more defined with each step. The walls trembled with the power of its presence. The air was thick with dread, and Noah could feel it. The weight of his family's curse, the sins of generations past bearing down on him. This was it. He had to end it here. The entity's voice boomed in his head, twisting his thoughts. "You are just like them," it hissed. "Weak, powerless, doomed to fail." The words cut deep, but Noah refused to let them break him. His ancestors had given in to fear, but he would not. He would not let the darkness win. His body trembled, but he stood firm, ready to fight for his life, for his family's redemption. With a scream, Noah launched himself at the entity, his body fueled by desperation and rage. The air around him crackled with energy as he collided with the force that had tormented his family for so long. The entity howled, its form twisting violently as Noah fought back with everything he had. He could feel the power of his ancestors coursing through him, their strength, their fear, all merging into a single purpose. The entity shrieked in pain as Noah pushed against it, the force of his will breaking through the dark power that had controlled him. The walls of the house trembled as if in response to the battle. The curse was fighting back, but Noah refused to yield. He would end this now, or he would die trying. With a final desperate push, Noah broke through the entity's defenses. The creature screamed in agony, its form beginning to dissipate. The darkness around them faded, and the house groaned, as if releasing a long-held breath. Noah collapsed to his knees, gasping for air, his body battered but triumphant. The room around him was silent now, the oppressive atmosphere lifted. He had done it. The curse was broken. But as he looked around, he felt a strange emptiness. The entity was gone, but the house remained, its walls still holding the weight of the past. Noah knew the house would never truly be free of its dark history, but at least his family was now at peace. He stood up, feeling the weight of his ancestors' sacrifices lift from his shoulders. It was over. The morning after the battle, Noah stood in the doorway of the old house, his body aching, but his soul lighter than it had been in years. The house, still and silent, seemed almost peaceful now. The air was crisp, fresh with the scent of morning dew. But Noah couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The house, though freed from the curse, felt like it was waiting for something. It was no longer the oppressive, suffocating force it had once been, but its dark history lingered in the corners. As he stepped outside, the sun broke through the clouds, casting light on the crumbling walls. It was a new day, but the shadows of the past had not been erased. Noah knew he had faced the darkness within the house, but would it ever leave him? He turned to look back one last time, knowing that while the curse was gone, The house would forever haunt his memories. Noah tried to leave, to move forward, but the house lingered in his thoughts. His every step felt like an echo of the past. The trees swayed in the breeze, but the shadows that stretched from the house felt like they were still reaching for him. As he walked farther away, his mind kept drifting back to the faces of his ancestors, trapped within the walls. He could still hear their whispers, faint and distant, as if they were still calling to him. He didn't know if they were truly gone, or if the house had left a mark on him that would never fade. The curse may have been broken, but their spirits remained, and he could feel them watching him, lingering in the periphery of his vision. He tried to convince himself that it was over, that he had escaped, but deep inside, he knew that the terror would never truly leave him. As Noah reached the edge of the property, the ground beneath his feet seemed to shift. The momentary feeling of peace he had felt began to fade, replaced by an unsettling silence. He could still hear the whispers, clearer now, but not coming from the house. They were in his mind and his very thoughts. "You can never escape," they whispered. "You belong to us." The voice was familiar, but distant, like a memory he had tried to forget. Panic surged through him as he looked around, but no one was there. His heart raced. He had escaped the house, but had he truly escaped its curse? The truth was undeniable. The terror of the house would haunt him forever, whether in his mind or in the shadows that followed him. Noah hurried to his car, his mind a whirlwind of fear and confusion. He had to leave. He couldn't stay here any longer. As he drove away, the house grew smaller in the rearview mirror, but the feeling of being watched only intensified. The whispers, faint but constant, seemed to follow him, as though they were carried by the wind. He shook his head, trying to block them out, but the voices wouldn't stop. They were the voices of his family, his ancestors, trapped in the house, now trapped in his mind. Noah clenched the steering wheel, his knuckles white. He was free, or so he thought. The house had broken its hold on him, but he wasn't free from the curse. It had been passed down through the generations, and it had found a new home in him. Noah's thoughts were a blur as he drove, the road stretching endlessly before him. His body was exhausted, but his mind wouldn't let him rest. He had faced the darkness, but the darkness was still with him. As he looked out at the open road, a faint smile crossed his lips. But it was hollow. The curse had been broken. The house had been freed. But Noah knew the truth. The terror was not tied to a place, but to a legacy. A legacy he could never escape. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows on the road, Noah realized that no matter how far he ran, the house and its horrors would always be a part of him.